So it's the second Sustainability for Cargo webinar that we organize, and the first one, it was in July. The overall topic was sustainability in general, and can we still afford to care about sustainability in the current context? What is good is to see that the participants, they said yes, and it's more than ever that we have the opportunity to really redefine this next normal or new normal and really embed the sustainability into strategy. Another question we asked during that first webinar was, is sustainability a priority in your company? And it was a yes. Not everybody is saying yes with really the appropriate team, budget, and support, but still it's quite important that we show a very genuine interest on sustainability. We need to move, obviously, away from sustainability as a greenwashing exercise and really put concrete actions on that. Today, so last time we were really discussing about all the aspects of sustainability, while today we'd like to really focus on one of them, which is goal number 13 and climate action. This is really the focus of today's discussion. It's decarbonizing air cargo. So very much linked to this goal number 13 on climate action. What we mean by decarbonizing air cargo, it's actually the combination of decarbonizing aviation and decarbonizing logistics. And air cargo is a very special animal because cargo is one part. Until very recently, cargo was not very well known to the general public. With the COVID crisis, we got in the spotlight, we as the cargo industry. But when we say decarbonizing air cargo, it's a lot linked to decarbonizing aviation. And that's why I'm very pleased to have really aviation specialists, Michael Schneider from IATA and Karlijn from SkyNRG, that will really talk about how we can decarbonize aviation and what is going to what has been committed by the aviation community, what is the progress, what is the future looking like. But having said that, air cargo is not just the aviation part, even if it's a big part. It's the full chain, and we need to really understand what the customer, so in that case, the shippers and the freight forwarders expect from the logistics chain and the air cargo players in terms of environment. And that's why I've invited Nina from FIATA, the association representing the freight forwarders worldwide, and Rogier from the European Shippers Council. So voice of the customer, which is really important. We need to look at also to not start from scratch. Obviously, there are many things that are already existing, not specifically on air cargo though, but we can't reinvent the wheel. It would not be wise. So we'd like to really look at what is being done today on the aviation side, on the freight transport side. There are many things. And also some concrete actions. And that's why we have Aga from South Pole invited also to speak today, because Aga will, I mean, she's a consultant and really helping companies in their project very concretely. So welcome everyone. It was a short introduction, but I really want to have enough time to discuss the topic with you guys. So what we agreed to discuss is, what we talk when we talk about decarbonizing. What do we mean? So in terms of objective, what are we talking about here? Is it measurement? Is it reduction? Is it offsetting? Is it really the removal of carbon? Concretely, when we talk about decarbonizing, we have to have some concrete actions. So targets and timelines associated to that, something that the aviation community has done already in the past, and it works. When you set up targets, you set up deadlines, and you have an action plan to really meet those targets and deadlines, it does work. So it's important to understand what are the targets and timelines for today, 2030, which is the deadline of the Sustainable Development Goals set by the UN, and also 2050. We have in aviation some long-term targets, because it's really we are an industry that is very heavy in assets, so lots of things really requires a lot of time. So that's why we have this type of timeline. We need also to look at the impacts of COVID crisis, and it's going to be an element of the discussion. And then when we say, okay, decarbonizing air cargo, whose responsibility it is? From the industry, the policymakers, the financial institutions, the customers. So this is really the type of topics we will discuss during this webinar. I would like to start with the voice of the customer. I always choose to do that. So what do shippers and forwarders want and need? What do they do already to address climate change, and what they expect from the air cargo industry? So this question is really going to Roger on the shipper side and Nina on the forwarder side. So maybe ladies first. Nina, if I give you the floor, and you can reactivate your mic. Great.
Yes. Thank you very much, Céline. Good afternoon or evening, morning, everyone. And thank you very much for this invitation and this opportunity. We're really happy to be able to participate to this exchange on this very important topic. Well, as to answer your question, I think one point that is important to raise is that forwarders, they look to reduce inefficiencies and optimize the supply chain. And I think this is where topics and issues like interoperability and intermodality are very important. And this is where I think air freight needs to be included, because discussions about intermodality tend usually to focus on air, sea, and road, and this is I think this is an important point that that needs to be taken into consideration. So basically, as forwarders, to sum up, we expect all actors to collaborate along the supply chain, because we're looking at the end-to-end, and this is where these kind of initiatives are very important. And to work together to reduce these inefficiencies and to optimize the supply chain, because this is a very important starting point to decarbonize the whole supply chain and cargo transport of goods.
Absolutely. Roger, what exactly is the priorities and the focus of shippers?
Yes, thank you, Céline. Hi, everyone. Yes, well, shippers, of course, have sustainability always on the top of their minds. But also there's always a challenge within companies. For one part, a shipper doesn't look at air cargo and think, how can I make it more sustainable? They look at their supply chain and see, how can we make it more sustainable? So there's also a part of shippers that say to me, the best way to make it more sustainable is do less air cargo at all. Now, of course, that's not what everybody here wants to hear, but there are companies looking at doing way more ocean transport because that would be more sustainable than aviation or an air cargo. Another part which is important is that there's always a little bit of a tension with shippers internally between supply chain management and procurement. And that revolves around the, always discussion on what is the price you are going to pay for transport. The more sustainable options are always a little bit more pricey. So that poses a challenge. What you do see is that multinationals especially are really stepping forward in making judgment based on really their carbon footprint and focus less on the effects on pricing. And I think also one other thing that's very important, which Nina also already described, is the collaboration between all parties within the air cargo sector. So there's a lot of good developments. For instance, what I know is going on in the perishable sectors, where shippers, airlines, forwarders, and ground handlers are talking about packaging products and how that can be used to increase load factors on airplanes. And I think it's also those really practical sides that really help on improving sustainability. But it is a big challenge, and air cargo has a long way to go. But a challenge is always good.
Thank you, Roger. It's true that the goal of most of us in this session, speakers and attendees, is not really on shifting modes. We would like to continue having customers, but I understand I understand that. That's why also we need, as an industry, as an air cargo industry, we really need to accelerate the sustainable transformation of our industry, so that we continue being appealing to customers. So Michael, maybe your turn. What has aviation committed to do already, and are we on track?
Yeah, thank you very much, Céline. Good to reconnect with you. It's been some time.
Yes.
And hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. It's a great pleasure. So let me first start saying, it's extremely important that we hear the customer's voice. And I can tell you, I assure you, we're hearing you. And Céline knows we had lengthy discussions with shippers and forwarders, and it was always very enlightening for us, because we need to sort of reconcile expectations and see in how far we actually meeting those expectations. But also it's an opportunity to keep that dialogue, to convey a message of our environmental ambition. And I think that's something that I would like to maybe stress today. But of course, there's also important work that has been done to society, and I just want to reiterate the importance and thank the cargo community for what they have done to bring us out of that lockdown, bring us out of this lockdown situation. So it was extremely important. So looking really at how we're doing and what our ambition is, and here, of course, I think everyone knows about the IATA's or the industry's goals that have been set, the three goals. And that's, before we maybe move to Corsia, I just wanted to reiterate, and I hope there not to be any eyes rolling, because they have heard so many times. But maybe I'm sure there's maybe some people on this in this session that have not or are not familiar with the goals. So we really have a short, midterm, and long-term goal. And of course, the short-term goal, it's really what happened between 2009 and now. And here we look at a fuel efficiency improvement of 1.5%. Actually, our team here in Geneva has been tracking this, and that is quite a complicated exercise, because you have to get all the fuel information of all the airlines that are IATA members. So at the time we were 300 members. And here we're tracking actually quite well, and we actually bypassed the goal of 1.5%. We're tracking at 2%. This can be mainly attributed to the introducing of newer aircraft models. But of course, naturally, this contribution, on the freighter side, is probably not as much. Then it really the contribution came from the passenger side, because we all know that cargo operators largely operating a much older fleet. And I have checked with one of my colleagues who is familiar with decommissioning or aircraft. It's 32 years, the average age, so it's much older than on the passenger side. But of course, we have also a midterm goal, and here we see already CORSIA as a slide. It is really the cap of our emission, or having a carbon neutral growth from 2020. So we're really in the midst of CORSIA, and I'm sure we will talk about CORSIA a little bit more in detail today. So I'm not going to go too much in detail of it, but it's an important stone or a pillar in our achieving our second goal. And the third one is really to cut our emission in this half relative to 2005 emissions. And this is happening over the next 15 years. We can only achieve this by incorporating new technologies, so radical new technologies, operating more efficiently, as we heard before. And then I'm happy to elaborate more on that maybe further on when we talk about more the specifics of air cargo. Okay. Thank you, Céline. Back to you.
Thank you, Michael. And it's true that Michael and I, we have worked together when I was still with IATA, and both of us, we were involved with shippers and freight forwarders and obviously airlines to develop the air cargo carbon footprint methodology, which is really the methodology that is now an international standard, IATA and ICAO standards, to measure the carbon footprint at shipment level for air cargo. So we have had extensive discussions with the air cargo customers, and it was really enriching to hear them. Maybe, so you mentioned CORSIA, and that's why we have the slide also on that. Maybe Aga, you want to explain the offsetting mechanism and how it works and how it can really help on decarbonizing?
Sure. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here. At South Pole, we are working with aviation and shipping industry, helping them to meet their environmental targets. And one of those targets would be meeting the CORSIA requirements, which as Michael just mentioned, setting the baseline of emissions that was originally based on 2019-2020 average, and anything above that emission level had to be either reduced by operational improvements, sustainable aviation fuel, and anything that couldn't be done through those had to be offset. And here comes offsetting. And South Pole, for those who don't know, South Pole is the biggest project developer on the ground. These are the projects that are actually generating carbon credits, the carbon compensation that comes from those projects is an easy and affordable starting point and can act as a bridge solution as a sector scales up. And we have about 700 of projects on the ground in different technologies, different types, from renewable energy, from forestry, some community projects. And these projects generate carbon offsets, which we then can supply to our customers, whether it's airlines, whether it's shippers, any company really that is on the journey to be climate neutrality.
But is really offsetting a solution to reduce and to decarbonize?
We are all up for sustainable aviation fuel, and we are also partnering with Board Now and SkyNRG. It's just that this is the easiest solution at the moment, if we are honest. We probably all know that, I believe that the audience here knows that the aircraft we are currently on operation, they will be in the air for another 30 years. Sustainable aviation fuel is coming up. There are a few companies, there's actually only one company which is doing it on the commercial side, which is actually selling it to customers. The others are still more of a plans and ambitions to set the plans to produce sustainable aviation fuel. It's still not enough. It is the way to go, absolutely. And at South Pole, we work also with other companies, not just the aviation and shipping industry. And first step for us is to measure the emissions and find ways and strategies to reduce those emissions, and only then suggest offsetting.
Okay, thank you, Aga. So Nina and Roger, is it known by your members, by shippers and forwarders, what aviation is doing to reduce its carbon footprint? Is it already known?
Yes, I think, well, I know the forwarders are really aware and know about these initiatives, but I think, again, what needs to be raised and what is important, it's exactly this is why, because there are some efforts in the different parts of the supply chain. This is why it's critical that we all work together to contribute together to this decarbonizing. Again, as Roger said, previously, we are focusing on the whole supply chain. So this is, again, to work together rather than working in silos. And this is why we're really happy to participate in this kind of exchanges and to collaborate with TIACA, but also with IATA on these topics. And this is where also associations like FIATA can play an important role by contributing to raising this awareness of its membership and to serve also as platforms of exchanges of best practices that can be where we can learn from each other and move forward in this in the decarbonizing of the entire supply chain again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nina. Roger?
Yes, I actually have to think about the executive summit in Budapest, which was my last international travel I did before the whole lockdown. And I talked to Karlijn Hughes there, who I just found out is going to leave, unfortunately. And it was also about CORSIA, and he said, you know, we are doing a lot of talking between airlines, but we're not doing a really good job in bringing it to our customers. I don't really agree with him. I think a lot of people know what's going on, but he really had the idea of we need to do way more in reaching out to the other partners in the supply chain, especially shippers and forwarders. So he's really working on that, and I think that's good. But I think, you know, these goals are tough, and as a customer, you know, we really need to work with the other partners to see how we can help them achieve these goals. You know, they're not alone in these goals and in achieving them.
Absolutely.
Céline, can I just make a short intervention? Just wanted to quickly circle back to CORSIA and just wanted to highlight that we as the sector see CORSIA as a midterm measure that unfortunately or fortunately has to be implemented, because some of the radical new technologies will take some time until they can actually be come into fruition and can be enforced. So we're going to be depending on liquid fuel for some time, so battery powered, etc. We will talk about that. Will kick in at a later stage. So it's really a complementary measure. We don't see this as the way out. Absolutely, I want to stretch that, because I've heard it many times before. So now you have CORSIA, and now you're out of the, you know, you basically can continue as you have been doing. No, it's not the case. And of course, offset are important, but SAF, we have heard it. Just for a little correction, there's more than one provider, and I think our SkyNRG colleague will talk about this a bit more. Actually, it is more than a concept. It is actually there's production facilities. It has been scaled up to a certain extent, of course, can be improved. And there's more than 200,000 flights. It is really working. So we're moving away from, is it possible? Is it safe to, okay, how we can scale it up? Just as a short remark.
Okay. Thank you, Michael, for the precision. And I think it's important to explain that CORSIA is not the long-term goal, and we don't feel, as an industry, we don't feel that we are like relaxed now that we can have the CORSIA framework. I'd like to just maybe jump on what Roger said. You know, this discussion you had with Glenn last year in Budapest, it shows that yes, there are more work to do to communicate what aviation industry is doing towards the cargo folks. But I think it's not just about really communication. So it's also about looking at what specifically outside of the the overall, work that aviation is doing outside of what logistics world is also looking at. What can the air cargo industry specifically do to contribute to decarbonize the chain? So, do you have any idea on what needs to be done, on the ground, on the trucking part, on the storage part? Because air cargo, it's about the end-to-end chain, and it's not just the airborne part.
Yes, Céline,
yes.
I think there's a lot of measures that you can take. I think ground handling is a very important part, and there's a lot that can be achieved. I know airports are looking at can we electrify most of the equipment that's being used. There's a lot of diesel-powered equipment still being used. I think that's a major point. I think if you look at warehousing, you have to look at ways to make the warehouses able to have solar panels installed and have that as a requirement, because sometimes you can build a warehouse but the roof's not strong enough. That should not be allowed. So there are many things I think that we can really work on projects and making things better, and also, for instance, sharing more data and come to a system in which we can have a common understanding on what a carbon footprint is, because if we agree on that as a whole sector, then we can sort of have a performance index on which, for instance, shippers can decide what the best way is to use the air cargo sector to have the most sustainable operation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. When I hear that, I mean, for me it makes sense, but I'm also conscious that we are in this middle of a major crisis that is really impacting the entire aviation industry. Do you think that it's feasible nowadays to have also more investments on the infrastructure, on the ground, on those massive projects, Karlijn, on sustainable alternative fuel? I don't know what the reactions of your stakeholders is given the current context of the crisis. I mean, is it still something that we can have, like companies investing in that?
Hopefully we can, right? I mean, we're hi, by the way, everybody. Karlijn from SkyNRG. Just to answer your question quickly on the SAF side of this story. So definitely, hopefully, we can and we kind of must. Even though we have Corona, of course, we can see it two ways. Yes, everybody is in the survival modus, but on the other hand, we can also create the new normal and start building up more sustainable. Of course, one of the options could then be sustainable aviation fuel. And we also see at this moment in time, of course, with sustainable aviation fuel offtake, it's at all-time low because there are almost no flights. So when it comes to direct offtake of sustainable aviation fuel, it's really low. But there are also a decreased number of flights right now. But when we see of scaling up the industry, luckily for that, it's not something which can be done in some months. This is a process and a project we have to take on from years and years to come. So us building dedicated SAF facilities, or for us scaling up this industry, is not luckily going to blow us away in these months of Corona. This is something that we have to take on from now ever forwards. So yes, moment in time, offtake is really low, but that's not holding us back to scale up the industry for the upcoming years.
Good. I like when it's optimistic. Michael, so you talked about what has been done, and the fuel efficiency year over year is looking good and even better than the target. But we have, as aviation, some really ambitious targets for 2050. So what are the promising developments, technologies, innovations that will decarbonize aviation?
Yeah, thank you, Céline. Yes, there are some really exciting stuff in the pipeline that's going to be happening in the next coming years. In general, when we look at some of those things, of course, we talk we have a more holistic approach. We look at the entire aviation system, not only specifically in cargo, on the cargo side, but also, admittedly, there are very specific cargo measures that will help us to decarbonize. And I think some of them were already mentioned, such as lighter packaging. But of course, the technology side of things will really drive some of the development. As we all know, each new aircraft model rolled out today is 20 to 25% more efficient than their predecessor. So there's large fleet renewal happening. Typically, this is also affecting the cargo operators who tend to operate an older fleet. How, of course, COVID will have an impact on that. We could see earlier retirement of aircraft. There will certainly be some changes to that pattern that we had seen in the past. But when we talk about new technology, what is it really about? And you see you see already here a slide, some of the radical new technologies. And some of you may have seen, I think it was last week or the week before, Delft University together with KLM and a corporation had modeled or had built this model, the blended wing body, the Flying V, which is an amazing design, and they flew this model. It worked, and it of course reduces drag, increases lift, reduces also noise. So this kind of things that will be happening in the coming years, that you will see aircraft design, airframe technology changing, but of course also engine technology very much changing. We have heard already about sustainable fuels, but also electrification of aircraft. We have seen some examples of very small aircraft of 2 or 4 seaters. There's the Pipistrel aircraft, a Czech, very small manufacturer who has come up with good ideas. Unfortunately, battery power is still, the energy density is relatively low. So we will see really those battery powered aircraft maybe on a shorter haul, maybe 70 to 90 seaters happening in the future. So that's something that will certainly kick in the future. Maybe can move to the next slide. I think because something that interests people, what's happening with the electric technology scale up, and here you see a very good graph. You know, 9-seater today, it's the maximum that can be achieved so far, but then in 2035, we could see 15 to 20-seater, and then even up to 100 seats by 2050. Hydrogen has also been in the discussion and more coming to the forefront. Of course, there's some inherent challenges with hydrogen because it changes the aerodynamics quite dramatically of an aircraft. But also it's about the, you know, bringing that the energy source to airports. That's a major challenge. I mean, we have hydrogen system for liquid fuels, for kerosene, but to enable that with hydrogen, it will be a huge challenge. On the SAF side, certainly there have been some huge advancements, 250,000 flights so far. There's 7 approved pathways that can be deployed, but honestly, I'm not going to talk too much about it because I know that we have a SkyNRG expert here that can, Karlijn, who can tell us, can inform us much better because she's really very close in contact with the airlines. But it's already happening. It needs to be scaled up. And then, of course, I mentioned before, CORSIA is an important building block in those scenarios where we at least help climate financing and reducing emissions elsewhere. Again, it's an intermediate step. And then, of course, I see also to answer maybe the question in terms of our vision, what's happening with COVID, will it wane, will it become less? Actually, I asked myself the question when COVID started. You know, I was worried where is this going? But we've seen it almost every week, new announcements, airlines being more ambitious actually. You have heard last week, One World, Net Carbon Zero, One World Airlines, the Alliance Group, would like to make pledges to be net carbon zero by 2050, and so others airlines doing the same. So there's a lot of voluntary commitments coming out, and that shows to me that this is really happening. So yeah. I will stop here.
So it's another like a quite positive and optimistic view on frankly what the aviation community can achieve in the long term goal, new technologies, electric vehicles, etc. You know, for this morning I booked my flight, so my ticket for the one of the first electric powered air taxi flights with Volocopter. So I booked it. I'm very impatient, but it was written in my booking that it's not going to happen before December 2022. So I will have to be patient, but still, I'm very proud that I booked it. So Karlijn, so from the sustainable alternative fuel or aviation fuel rather point of view. What are the ambitions, the promises of SAF?
Yeah, great. Also, the electrical flight sounds really amazing. So do send me the link because I'm curious about it. But maybe to tell a bit more about sustainable aviation fuel. So it's an alternative for fossil kerosene. So it's a so-called drop-in fuel. That means that in the end, after being certified, it has almost the same technical qualities as fossil kerosene, and therefore it can be blended with fossil kerosene. So that's the easy part about sustainable aviation fuel. Once blended, you can just tank it into the wing of the plane, and the plane itself does not need to be altered. Sustainable aviation fuel, for the ones who don't know, in the end you can almost make it out of everything. So you can make it out of municipal solid waste. You can make it from carbon directly captured from air. If you want to, you can even make kerosene out of me. It's just, in the end, it's a C atom chain length, and you have to combine them or break them down. And in that sense, you just heard Michael speak about it as well. So there are 7 pathways certified, and what we mean by that is that there are currently some technologies, so technologies which are capable of producing sustainable aviation fuel and which are technically certified, and per technology you have then a different feedstock. So for example, there's this one technology, it's the hydrotreated esters and fatty acid. It's the HEFA technology. And with this technology, you have a certain feedstock base. It's fatty and oil type of feedstock for this technology. And these are the only feedstocks you can use for this technology. So you can imagine that it's quite important from this moment, because we only have one technology which is commercially available. You also heard our partner from South Pole speak about it, that right now there's only one facility which is dedicatedly, so that's the difference between Michael and Agna. There's one facility worldwide, it's in Los Angeles, which is on a dedicated basis producing sustainable aviation fuel. There are other producers which are producing sustainable aviation fuel, but that's more on a demand type of contracts, so that's not consistently being produced. Maybe the good thing to know about SAF, this is also the slide you see right now on your screen, is that the difference between sustainable aviation fuel and fossil kerosene is, it has to do with the carbon cycles. So what you see on the left side, it's a circle. So in the end, for example, when we would use agricultural residues, to begin with, it's a plant, right? So when we use plants to make sustainable aviation fuel out of it, then we burn it and we will release all the carbon atoms again. But then there are once more plants because we want these agricultural residues again. So that's how you fill the cycle. So the plants absorb the carbon, put it in the soil, then you use the plants, but in the end it's being absorbed again. So this is called a short carbon cycle. What happens with fossil kerosene, and this is the difference between something being sustainable and non-sustainable when it comes to kerosene. With fossil kerosene, you have long carbon cycles. So what does that mean? You have carbon stored in the soil for millions and millions of years. You take it out of the soil on really high speed. It will take millions and lots of years for it to be stored back in the soil, but you pumping it out of it on really high speed. But before the circle continues, you actually have enormous carbon stacking up in the atmosphere in between. So that's actually the difference between the fossil kerosene, which has a long carbon cycle, and sustainable aviation fuel, which has this short carbon cycle. Next to the CO2 benefits of sustainable aviation fuel, it also has non-CO2 positive effects like NOx, particulate matter. So that's a really interesting point. And maybe it's also good to know, because we already spoke about SDGs, for example, and we said we were tackling SDG 13 today, how to tackle the climate crisis. I think it's also a really positive story to tell behind sustainable aviation fuel, is that there are many more benefits, not only just, for example, CO2 or non-CO2 reductions. When performed well, and of course this is really important because what feedstock can we use, when performed well, you can also think of other benefits like increasing biodiversity, soil health, job creation, etc., etc. So it's also interesting to look to sustainable aviation fuel maybe at a more holistic perspective. And I also definitely agree that there's sustainable aviation fuel, that's the difference between maybe between offsetting. That offsetting is really well, and I think we should do it all, right? I mean, we have a huge carbon debt, so we should definitely use everything. Offsetting is often out of the sector, and sustainable aviation fuels in the supply chain. So maybe a small note on that. Maybe you saw already coming by, but could you perhaps go to the slide of where it says the board now? I heard South Pole also quickly touching upon it. And maybe this is really exciting because also, especially for the cargo industry. So around 1/5 of aviation emissions comes from cargo, air cargo. So we have a major opportunity over here. And what we also spoke about before is that the focus has been really on airlines and passengers, but cargo is also really important. So right now there's just opportunity. Yes, the industry needs to scale, but it's scaling up slowly. So right now we're in the process of building this facility in the north of the Netherlands, which is pretty exciting because this is a facility which as its main product produces sustainable aviation fuel, and once again on a dedicated basis. So the opportunity, for example, could be for the air cargo industry that your cargo can be flown on sustainable aviation fuel. And not only that, because this industry is scaling up, you can also actually enable facilities like the one in the north of the Netherlands with your offtake contracts, because that's a huge difference. I already saw it in the chat box. Yes, there's a huge price gap. So we definitely need the industry to help to bridge the gap. And then these exciting initiatives can come along.
Great. So Nina, Roger, do you think like shippers and freight forwarders, they would be ready to support the sustainable alternative fuel, make like some commitment to use flights powered by SAF?
Yes, and they really should. I mean, I think sustainable aviation fuels is one of the biggest developments that we have that we can use right now and that we can further develop into the future. And moving at the end in the form of synthetic kerosene, what Karlijn also explained, is really a way to go for especially air cargo, because I don't see electric flights being used for air cargo. I don't think that's even possible physically. So, you know, there are some shippers really looking into this, but I think also that we need to see, you know, in which way we combine this together with the forwarders, because that's basically a little bit of the relationship, of course, that we have within this sector. So we don't book directly with an airline. So that makes it somewhat difficult, but I think it's very good that we can have these discussions. And if I just may add one point, there's a lot of talk within Europe on taxation on aviation. And my problem with that is that it's always based on taxation being a goal. And I don't think that taxation per se is a goal. It should be a means that, for instance, all the revenues of a tax could be used in supporting new projects on sustainable aviation like SAF or like the Flying V or electric flights. And that is currently sometimes lacking in the discussion, is that we're pulling money out of the market, but we're not using it trying to make aviation and then probably in general more sustainable.
Mm.
Yeah, I would just, I agree with Roger, and I think SAF is very promising. And on the taxation part, it's true that in general, the crisis highlighted inefficient, some limits, but in general, not only in supply chains, but generally things that were already existing, but they highlighted it. And it's really an opportunity to foster innovation and technological development, digitization that also will contribute to decarbonization. And in this area, I think taxation or generally policy approaches should sometimes also try to look at incentivize technological development rather than always penalizing, but looking at incentivizing technological development. And this is true not only for air cargo, but again for the general situation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So in the interest of time, because we are running close to the end, I have one last question for you guys, but first maybe one comment on this last slide and the support that we need also from the industry. I would like to see in this type of project, if you look at the slide from Karlijn, some names of shippers or forwarders also in that type of coalition for SAF. I think if the customers are also really part of it, part of the solution, it will help. It's my view. And in terms of the support from the policymakers, I really agree with you, Nina. It should be more on the incentives rather than penalties, or at least a combination of both. But I also see a benefit of having the political will to go for sustainable practices, sustainable energies, etc. I just recently saw a commitment from the Swedish government to be carbon neutral. So when there is a political will, I think it helps, especially in those circumstances. So we can't cover all the questions that we had in mind, but let's maybe just finish with one last, which is your views, your perceptions, your hope on the future. Do you think the future will be carbon neutral? Aga, would you like to start?
It's a huge question, but I'm an optimist, and I've seen a lot of changes in the attitude of people towards sustainability. There is a big shift that we've observed in other companies and other industries, not just aviation and shipping, where clients actually deliberately go for more green solutions, definitely more aware of the impact it has on the environment. So I think with education, with a good communication and explanation why we are doing what we are doing, I think it can happen, but I think we all have to contribute, and whether we are a big company, small company, or just on a personal level, you know, even moving, like we see during COVID, we're moving from driving cars to cycling to walking, to not buying so much, for example. So yeah, I'm positive. So I would say yes, from ambition to action, yes.
From ambition to action. Okay, good one. Nina?
Yeah, I'm also an optimist, and I think the question is not if, but it's rather how. And I agree with Aga on this. I think it's really, I would like to really underline this collaboration necessity across all across all actors along the supply chain. So yes, I'm sure it will, but we need to find a way to do it together.
Great, Roger.
Yes, I'm going to join the Yes Club, also because I think, well, we basically committed ourselves to this carbon neutral future. If you look at all the European developments and actually raising the bar for 2030 for 55% CO2 reductions, that's a pretty strong level. But I think it really pushes us to work on these innovations. And I also think that the COVID crisis will help also a little bit of the consumer awareness, understanding, you know, if you buy something from Alibaba, you know, it comes from the other side of the world, and you might ask yourself, is it really necessary? Now, I know, of course, that these are also my members, but I mean, those are things that we really need to think about, and that will also help, I think, in the future. But you know, I think we really need also some support from governments in achieving those technical breakthroughs to reach that level of carbon neutrality.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, so that we end with...
Yes. Yes, absolutely. I have no doubt there will be a time when we will be carbon neutral. The big question is when. Yeah. And of course, we have the ambition, we have the goals, but we need to also see what's realistically possible. And there's been some work, a lot of work actually being done. Just want to point out the work of the industry partner ATAC, the Waypoint 2050, that will come out soon, hot from the press, I think in October. I really recommend everyone reading and looking at this. It's a very, very collaborative, important piece of work that has been done with aircraft manufacturer, with the whole chain of contributor to make this happening. So this sets out already the pathway. Let's face it, I mean, the public expects us to restart in a sustainable, environmental friendly way. I think there's no way back, and that we have to be even more ambitious than what we have done before. So that is the expectation. A lot of actually government bailouts are linked to the demand for being more environmental friendly and support decarbonization. So I'm strongly convinced we certainly will meet our targets, but but also the ambition of other airlines having now made public announcements being even more ambitious. You know, we hear numbers in years like 2030, net carbon, zero carbon, net emissions by zero. So I think that shows that, we kind of aligned as an industry, and we hope we can move forward that way.
Thank you, Michael. And I agree, ATAG is a very important player in that field. One of the commitment also on TIACA side is to build on what is already being done by the leaders, and IATA and ATAG and ACI are doing so much on that front. And to be a vehicle to make sure that the air cargo community knows about that. It's not the only commitment that we have, because we want also to drive the action also on the cargo side with what needs to be done specifically on the cargo side. Karlijn, you're on mute.
I will unmute myself, yeah, and I can finish this round. Thank you. It shouldn't be a question, right? It should be really straightforward. Every industry on this planet should prioritize sustainability in its business. Otherwise, you lose your license to operate. If we go forward and if we continue like this, I mean, our planet cannot take it. So I think, like Nina said, like Michael said, maybe we should stop asking ourselves, if we want to achieve carbon neutrality, accept it as a fact, because then we can start focusing on the how or on the when. So I think that's just the simple and straightforward answer from my side.
Fantastic. That's a great answer, and I'd like to conclude with mine. I think if we can decarbonize and we see that we have solutions for that, we must. We have no choice. So what I think is very important and linked to what you guys said is the will, the collaboration, and we need to focus on the how and the when. So specifically on the air cargo part. There is really a strong commitment on TIACA side to define the pathway to decarbonize air cargo, and we call for all our partners, all of you guys in the panel and the audience and the industry at large to do what the aviation community did years ago, really set up global industry commitments, have a vision, have clear targets, deadlines, and an action plan. And this is what we'd like to do. And we call all our partners to join that effort so that we can really concretely do something for the industry and for our customers. We are already 1 minute late. We said we will take some questions. Let me just check if we have questions. In any case, all the questions that have been asked, if we can't answer now, we can answer later. But let me just check. Where do I look? Alors. Do we have questions? Yes, we do. Okay. Okay, I have one. It's about cargo airplanes. Are there any initiatives by freight forwarders and shippers to request newer and more fuel-efficient freighters by airlines or to airlines? Even if it's more costly. Is it something that on your side, Nina and Roger, you see like really a push from shippers and forwarders to request their cargo to be put on new type of aircraft? Is it something, you know, is it the type of discussion that happens?
The discussion happens, but I know, for instance, some shippers that try and request the 747-8, which is, I think, 20% less CO2 emissions. But that also has to do with the fact that it can carry a higher load. So it actually has two effects. But primarily, like most shippers aren't directly in contact with the airline on the type of airplane that is being used, unless, well, it's a form of a charter. But if you look at full freighters, there's not a lot of options between the different airplanes. What I do think that works is, and I know, for instance, Schiphol Airport is doing that, is having a different mechanism for the landing fees in having newer airplanes pay a lower fee instead of the older, more polluting airplanes. Because in that way, you'll be able to have the newer, cleaner airplanes fly to airports at a lower rate than the more pollutant ones. I think that does work.
Okay. Nina, do you want to add something on your side?
No, not much. I don't know of any specific initiatives, but again, I think it's really about a more global approach. I think it depends a lot also on the leverage you can have but it's a very interesting point of discussion. Okay.
I'm looking at the chat, and I can see there was some movements on the chat, but people answering questions already. So it's interesting. It has created some some debate about the scalability and the price of SAF, also the payouts that are conditioned with sustainability goals that should help also the industry to restart greener, which is good news. So we'll see. I don't want to go any longer. Time is important, and it's good that we really try to stick to the time. Thank you so much for your participation. I think this discussion could have go on and on, because it's quite fascinating, and we have so much to say. I wish we could have more time. I hope it was useful for everyone, and I really do repeat that the goal is to all work together, recognize the work that has been done and that is being done by every player. Individual airlines, airports, the forwarders, the packaging companies, ULD containers, etc. There are so many improvements, innovations that are happening. I think it's really a collective effort to share the best practices, to also collectively agree on the vision for the future and some collective actions to make it happen. Thank you, everyone, and we'll have another of those webinars, but next time we'll probably focus on people, which is another element of sustainability, very important in crisis time as well. The importance of investing in our people and caring for the people that are making the industry what it is right now. Thank you, everyone. Have a great end of the day, and please answer the quick survey. I promise it's less than 1 minute. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Céline. Bye bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.